right, y'all. Look, we back. Another episode, just running into season 2. I feel like these ones is flowing so smoothly.
Very
Last one
smooth.
was a good one, but I'm so excited about this one. We hear so many good things about our current guest today, and this person was actually introduced to us by Josh, by brother Josh. So, look, welcome back. Another episode of Mic Check, Many Conversations.
Yes, sir.
I got my brothers with me. My man Doc in the building, and my brother Josh with me. And at the top, we introducing Dionne. Dionne, she's coming to us out of North Carolina as well. She's a developmental psychologist and a behavioral analyst. So, without further ado, Dionne, welcome on to the pod with the fellas.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm ready to get into some discussion. Thank you, Josh, for inviting me in.
No
That's my
problem.
brother. We've been locked in for a little minute now. So
Yeah.
it's a pleasure to meet y'all.
Listen,
Likewise,
we're just
likewise.
excited, man. Just excited. Yeah, I got a couple rapid fire questions for you, so we can kind of get to know you a little bit more. It's going to be pretty straightforward.
Okay.
So we can go ahead and get a shot off for you. Okay. All right, word. Here's the first one: protection or immaturity?
You said avoidance, protection, or
Is
insecurity?
avoidance, is it protection or is it immaturity?
Ooh, protection.
Silence, is it fear or is it strength?
Ew, that can be both.
Mm.
Can I like say both?
Hey, shoot it. Yeah, feel free.
All right, yeah, I'm gonna go with both. It's
Okay.
just depend on the circumstance, yeah, and the person.
Are men emotionally unavailable or emotionally untrained?
Both. It can be both.
Hard conversations, skill issue or pride issue?
Dang, y'all. I don't.
These some tough ones, Dion. My fault.
Yeah, there's like it can be either or.
All right, cool. Look, logic or vulnerability? Which do men hide behind the most? Logic or vulnerability?
Logic,
Is anger easier for men than sadness?
absolutely. Anger.
And last one I'm gonna shoot to you is what drives avoidance more, ego or insecurity?
That's deep. That's deep.
Man, I'm gonna have to go with both there too.
Word. Well, look,
Yeah.
since you went both on that one, we got to go with one more, okay?
All right.
Are boys taught to suppress or to survive?
Shoot, I mean, sorry.
It's all good.
I'm gonna have to say survive. Survival,
Yeah.
you end up suppressing. So yeah.
Yeah.
Some solid ones, man. Solid ones. Okay. Well, look,
Yeah.
we're gonna go ahead and get this one jumped off with my brother Doc. Doc got a solid list of go tos for us today, and this was gonna be titled more so around why do men avoid hard conversations. So, hence some of those questions that we did shoot to you, Dion. We can get the conversation rolling. I'm gonna pass it over to my brother Doc.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Well, I'll just kind of echo what my brother DB said. Thank you for being here, Dion, in this space and carving out some time to hang out with us. So we'll jump right into it. I think like just how this will flow. We have some questions that we created, and then folks who caught wind of the title for today, "Why Men Avoid Hard Conversations." They also kind of shot over some questions to us as well. So we'll go off of that. We'll have some good discussion, and then we'll just kind of see what flows from there. Before we kind of dive into the line of questions, just kind of like my quick little take here on this in regards to the theme for today. Again, why men avoid hard conversations. I think there's like a notion that like men avoid hard conversations because they don't care. You know what I mean? I think like one of the rapid fire questions that you had in regards to just like BB, if it's like men are suppressing or it's survival. I think growing up, we I feel especially in the black community we're kind of grew up taught that like be more emotionless. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? If you
Mm-hmm.
are kind of too emotional, it's looked as you're overly being sensitive and things of the sort. And I mean,
Mhm.
that's from youth, you know what I mean? And so over the years, going into adulthood, when you have that mindset, I can see how the notion of just like when it comes to difficult conversations, it could come across that way when men, avoid it based off of like them being emotionless and things like that, like I just talked about. So, but as a man, I feel like it's quite the contrary. I think like it's that we care too much, honestly, or we may not know how to enter those conversations in a healthy way.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And so I guess like that just leads me in the first question. This one will be towards you, Dion. I feel just like with your background and your expertise.
Mhm.
What's like some common patterns that you see in your profession when it comes to like men in conflict?
Okay. So first, I want to say like I agree with you in your perspective. One of the most common patterns I see when it comes to men in conflict, like you just said, it's not that you don't care. It's more that many were never really socialized on how to engage conflict in emotional, safe ways. A lot of men were taught, so taking it to like a cultural thing, like you mentioned, like black community, I think that's why I said survival reflects suppression. So we were taught and have been raised from beginning of centuries ago, our great, great, great slavery, you know, all things like coming out of that. We've been in survival mode, and within survival, we tend to suppress because we got to keep things moving. We can't sit in emotions, you know, we can't
Hmm.
dwell, you know, in those spaces. A lot of men were taught to suppress vulnerability, to like stay strong or to not, like you said, appear weak. So when conflict arises, especially in like intimate relationships, it can trigger defensiveness, a withdrawal, and, you know, just shutting down to like open dialogue. So what kind of like looks like indifference is often like emotional overwhelm, and you don't necessarily always have the tools, you know, to articulate things. So conflict overall in any space requires emotional literacy, and we don't tend to have that, you know, identifying your feelings, regulating them at the same time, and communicating them. So, you know, you got to identify. If you can't like put a label to what it is you're feeling, then there's no way that you're going to be able to regulate it for one, and even communicate it, you know, for two. And you know, many men weren't simply taught, you know, those skills. It was to keep it pushing.
Right, right. Oh, that's respect. I appreciate that answer because I think, like, as I think about, what you were saying, it kind of like makes me think, like, because I avoid conflict, at
Mhm.
times. And, it brings me to the question of like, what am I actually like feeling at that time when I avoid? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I think
Mhm.
like for me, it definitely is me feeling a sense of like overwhelmed. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? At the time, I'm overstimulated. I
Yep.
have the guys know Dionne, but just for your context, like I have two little ones, two under two. You know what I mean? And it's
Babies.
it gets tough. You know what I'm saying? They're growing up as I'm learning more how to be a father. They're obviously growing as well, and a lot of times that comes into play of like, obviously having a spouse and, us meshing our parenting styles together and all of those things. And so it definitely, it just made me think about, just what I may be feeling in that avoidance. And I think you hit it on the nail. It's just more of like, me feeling overwhelmed, me feeling
Mhm.
overstimulated at that
Mhm.
time. And it's just like, I need to deal with this emotion first before I'm able to articulate and do that conversation and dialogue in a healthy way. But
Mhm.
I'll digress from there, though. I'm curious, brothers, like what might y'all be feeling in that space as well? Like, if y'all may not avoid conflict, so it may not be a question that, pertains to you or applicable, but if you do at times, like what might be your actual feeling in those
I
moments?
mean, I mean, it depends on the situation. Everything I feel like is a situation basis. But how I feel in that moment is if I'm like overstimulated, I'm not gonna want to address it right then, not head on. I'm just gonna want to cool down, breathe, go in the other room, and then we can reconvene and talk about it. Because if I say something now in this heated, intense moment,
It's not what
I
you
might
mean.
hurt your feelings. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Like I might say something I really don't mean just because of the heightness of the situation. So if I can get time to process, I'm wrong, maybe she's wrong, maybe whoever's wrong, you know what I'm saying? Let me think on that and come back, and then I'll be in a better state of mind to talk about the issue that's bringing this conflict. You know, just taking a step back.
Yeah,
You
look,
know,
I think Dion hit it on the head in terms of not being able to communicate our feelings, not being able to like more so like to put it into the proper words. I'm learning to do exactly what you said, John. I'm learning to come back to it at a later time when I'm feeling a little bit better.
hmm
Most times for me, man, I usually try to address it while it's present. That way, no one can say, "Oh, this is old. You might have forgot what was said or like what
Mhm.
happened." So it's kind of like, nah, we got to keep this joint so fresh that
Mhm.
we both remember what happened and where we messed up so we can know how to fix it next time. But I've also seen times where, because of that, I'm still heated. And I'm like, this ain't really the best time for neither one of us to be having this conversation,
Mhm.
whether it be me and my spouse, me and my kid, or even somebody else. I think I'm leaning in more to begin to move away, calm down, and then possibly come back to the conversation. I will say that though, I think in terms of even a stepping away, sometimes I'm so heated that when I do step away and I calm down, I don't even want to come back to the conversation.
That's what I was
Mhm.
gonna get to.
yeah,
Mhm.
Man, it's like I don't even want to come back to it because I feel like what's gonna happen is I'm gonna boil right back to that same
hmm
Mhm.
spot that I was at first. So it's
Mhm.
almost like DB, do you hold off on the conversation or do you bring it back? I mean, do you just say, hey, listen, everything that happened, let's ignore it happened for the time being. We can discuss it later. Like that way you kind of prepare yourself and the person. Or do you really need to bring it back up? And Dion, I think this is more so like even everything you said, I would have to agree with.
Mhm.
in terms of like us being able to keep those feelings away, kind of keep them suppressed. I'm moving to a space of suppression. I haven't really seen much of a reason to like blurt out at the moment of time, like when the issue is there. You know what I
Well,
mean?
have you ever been, so in that perspective, I had like three concepts that I wanted to bring up, and that's the fight, flight, and freeze response.
Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely.
Also, masculinity, conditioning, and attachment styles.
Hmm.
Those things, because you have the avoidant, we tend to have like avoidant attachment styles in our culture, and especially as men. So when I listened to all of you, you all said, you kind of want to take a minute. Well, Derek and Josh, I know you both specifically stated like you need a minute,
I'll
to kind
include
of.
myself in that.
Okay, Doc,
Yeah,
I
Doc
got
said he
you.
don't even like conflict.
Um,
I'm a
Yeah, yeah.
processor. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so, you don't want to fight because that comes off as defensive, right? So, like I said, that fight, flight, or freeze. And we tend to do like these little finger things, like whenever you in fight, flight, or freeze mode. But that freeze and flight kind of comes into that avoidance, And when you suppress, Derek, directly to you and saying like you lean more into suppression, that's kind of like an analogy I like to say like a volcano. You pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down.
Hmm.
And then something else that may trigger, a similar situation that you suppressed months ago or whatever, it can cause an eruption, and
Yeah.
then resentment may, present itself. So I'm not really big on the suppressing. Now, I will agree on taking a minute. Sometimes you need to take a pause, and breathe for a second. I think in any relationship, you want to tackle whatever conflict and issue to have some resolve. So
Hmm.
if you don't come back to it, what does that mean if it presents itself again? I think that's a question you probably want to ask yourself. All right,
Hmm.
I done cooled down. I don't want to talk about it no more because I know if I talk about it again, it's going to take me back to this place. This is where I got to go back to that emotional literacy and identifying why is it taking you to this place? What
Hmm.
is it about this situation that if you mention it again, it's taking you there again? So identifying that, being able to articulate why, understand the why, obviously, and how comes after that. Like, how do I navigate this moving forward?
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I, that's very. Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. And I feel like, growing up, we're taught as young men, boys, coming into manhood, to be tough.
Hmm.
You fall off the swing set as a child. Why are you crying? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like let's not show those emotions. And then as you grow older in life, women want somebody that's emotionally available. You know what I'm saying? So, all like growing up, you always taught to be so tough, but then you get out here in this dating world, and women want somebody that's softer on the emotional side. Still being a dominant alpha male, but want somebody that's emotionally available. So, it's hard for men in this day and time that's been always taught to be so dominant, so type A personality, and then to come into a relationship and to be vulnerable is tough for men.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point, Josh. When you said growing up as a little boy, I think about so me majoring and having a background in expertise in developmental psychology. I start from prenatal to adulthood, just from the womb, to birth, to adolescent years, young adult, elderly, all things, and the whole aspect and cycle of life. So I think it's one question to ask, like, because we talked about survival and suppression, did we see growing up how conflict was handled? Typically, if you grew up in a home that conflict wasn't really handled safely, then your body kind of may interpret a disagreement as danger. Like, this is a like caution zone. So we kind of run away from danger. So it's something that we have to reflect on, like what were we taught, growing up, and how do we, shift that cycle?
Or the lack thereof. Not
Yeah,
being taught about how to even handle conflict or not even seeing
right.
it or
Mm-hmm.
you're not necessarily knowing how to regulate it. I think sometimes can
Exactly.
be feeling like you're back up against that wall too. So
Mm-hmm.
danger.
And I'm sure any of you, if you all are like me growing up, my parents like stay in the child's place. If they had conflict, they went behind the door and handled
Yeah,
that. I didn't see
correct.
it. I had both of my parents. I grew up in a traditional nuclear style home, but I also can reflect to say like I didn't see much conflict. And if it were any conflict, they didn't do that in front of us. It was go in your
Yeah.
room or something to that notion. So, and Josh, back to your point about emotional availability, I think this, I want to go back to what I had mentioned before. You got to have emotional intelligence first in order to be emotional available, and awareness. So there are like three components there when it comes to, that space. So in order for a man to be emotionally available, he needs to be emotionally intelligent and aware. Like emotional IQ has to be kind of, matured in order to be available. And us women don't see that sometimes. We just think of availability. But what about his intelligence and awareness around emotional space?
And that makes perfect sense to me. And I think like ultimately like growing up, I'm same way, Dionne, where I didn't see much like confrontation when it came to my parents and the household and things like that. And I think to some degree it has limited me or exposed me to some of those things to where when conflict do arise, I'm like, okay, I'm able to, like, I don't quickly go into a shutdown mode, but I get into a moment where I'm just like, I don't know if I should dive into this and add fuel to
Mm-hmm.
the fire, you know what I'm saying? And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely a processor. My fault at some points in times is that I don't know when to dive back into
Bring it
the
back.
situation. I'll
Mhm.
process and process and process until it's just like I've dealt with it in my
You dealt
mind
with
in
it
my own
internally.
space. Right. And I'm just like, all right, I'm done. Similar to what you said, DB, and things like that. So I'm definitely in that space as well. But I also think that, I sometimes when I avoid conflict, at least to me, how it feels like, it's just to protect my peace. Like, it's like, is this situation worth me getting out of pocket about, or just diving into it? Like I've seen this most of the times anyways, especially when you talk about like in a relationship style type of conflict and things like that, especially if you've been with that person for a long period of time. I know, DB, you can attest to this. Some of the things in the marital conflicts is not even like as big. It's just like little simple things that you just get annoyed with, vice versa, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? And I think like with that, it's just like, yes, it is situational. I think like Josh, you mentioned earlier as well. But it's just like, is that worth my peace? Is that
Yeah.
what I got up this morning and I plan on having a solid day? And I'm already being disrupted by whatever the case may be, whether it's work or whether it's, anybody who called me with bad news or anything, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, is it worth my peace? And so I kind of look at it from that lens as well, but I also am curious, and I think this is one of the rapid fire questions that I wanted to kind of circle back around to as well. It's like silence, maturity, or fear. Like, am I masking some of that avoidance, which I'm just protecting my peace, and I actually have to deal with those things? Like, is it more fear, or and I know it can be both. Like, is it maturity in some levels as well? But I'm curious, for the group and your situations, for when you avoid conflict, do you think that a lot of the situations that you're placed in, is it more I'm rebelling from diving into this situation because it is just mature for me to do so, or I don't know how I'm going to react if I dive into the situation? It's more something that's fear.
Yeah, look, I get to a point now, bro, where I think it is to kind of just keep the peace. I mean, within myself and my spouse or whoever it is that I'm
Sure,
talking with.
sure.
Not necessarily to protect myself, but I do think for what? Like if I do respond to maybe even match energy, like what are we getting out of this? And I
Hmm.
think that that's literally the space that I've moved into. I'll say within like the past year.
Hmm.
What am I getting out of this? If there's nothing to get out of this, what's the purpose of proving wrong these days? I think that's why I even tell my brother, my and everyone that I talk to, I don't really do too well with giving in to peer pressure anymore. I think that was my college days, and I've done it enough where I'm like, what did I get out of that stupidity? I'm not going to continue to do that as an adult. And now I sit back and I assess the situation and say, is it really worth matching the energy, or should I just continue to stay calm? Maybe even walk away, come back. But I think my biggest thing is like figuring out what's the purpose? What are we doing here?
Hmm.
I know last season we spoke about even like dissecting the problem. I think I used a washing machine example of how you have to. If the washing machine is broken, you can't just know what the fix is. You got to be able to unwind some screws and figure out what the actual issue is. But I think the same thing in any kind of confrontation. Like, why are we here? And then maybe like figuring out that piece and possibly walking away and then coming back. But it is just to preserve the peace
Mm-hmm.
is more so where I'm leaning towards now. It ain't really about trying to protect myself or that person. It might be more so trying to just protect ourselves because there's no need to really be hiding and yelling and all that other stuff. So yeah, I would say more so to protect that peace.
Respect. Yeah. I think ultimately, like, when it comes to that, I'm also curious, and maybe Dionne, you can help us with this, if there is a difference between these two things, like emotional regulation and emotional suppression.
Mm-hmm.
Like it comes to like the fear and mature mentality again, like we were just speaking on. Is there a difference, between that? I feel like honestly, it's like a fine line. You know what I mean? Like
For
you
sure.
could feel like you are trying to regulate something, but you're actually suppressing it. And I don't know if it's the difference is like time or
Mhm.
if there is a difference between it, but curious of your thoughts on just like, what might be the difference, amongst those two things if there is any.
I agree with you. I think that it is an extremely fine line between the two. Um, we're usually looking at like the nervous system, rather than like a personality thing. So in those moments, the brain is like interpreting conflict as like a threat, like I said before. And in those moments, you're feeling overwhelmed, misunderstood, or even ashamed, sometimes. And anger becomes more of a social, acceptable emotion to express versus like really articulating things and taking a moment to talk through. So I think the fear factor comes in because of all of those things I just named, as far as like feeling overwhelmed, feeling ashamed, and you don't want to appear, weak or whatever the case may be. So I don't necessarily feel as though like you all have mentioned, and I have been working on this myself, on taking a minute and taking that pause in it. I think a moment of silence is not a bad thing. I don't technically look at that as suppression. As long as you're coming back to and can address in whatever manner that it may be that you address it in. Now, if you're just silent and you don't give any type of anything to the conflict, then yeah, you're suppressing that. Now, if you
Hmm.
recognize like I'm overwhelmed, I can't talk about this right now. You identified your feel, what you're feeling. You're able to articulate that and communicate that, and then you find the how do I maintain that peace, that y'all are talking about. I need a minute. Now, what I want to say is, I want to ask y'all too, like ask your question back. Like whenever you say protect your
Yeah.
peace in situation, that conflict isn't just you. Obviously, we're talking about another person that's involved,
Hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, do you feel that, and just to, pick y'all's brain a little bit, when you
Sure.
suppress, you typically don't come back to it. You just kind of keep it bottled up. And in some instances, you've said that, that's a way of protecting your peace. But is it really peace? Because this other person is still in your life and involved in this space, and they're involved in that conflict as well. So, how do you maintain that peace if you don't come back to it and find some resolve?
Look, I look at it as like being able to check the temperature of the room
Okay.
at times. I think protecting the peace is again not matching the energy, not
Mm-hmm.
matching the temperature that's in the room. If it's a high temperature, why for what?
For
I
sure.
think a perfect setting in a sense would possibly even be like over, if you sitting in a restaurant over dinner, everything's going good though. Like don't just start that thing off with the
Yeah, yeah,
with the
yeah, yeah,
issue that
yeah.
happened because that ain't the best way it started. But if
Right, right,
everything is
right.
going good, I think it's always good to slightly introduce it back into it in a way of like, but making sure that it um, is kind of genuine in a sense. Now, when I say that, when I say when you introduce it back in a genuine way, man, I think sometimes I feel that I'm putting sugar on it first, and then the salt comes after. Because it's
Got
like,
to.
dog, do
Mm.
you even want to bring this up? But you have
Yeah,
Yeah.
to.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like the sugar part is like, hey, listen, I know we had a disagreement the other day. I really want to talk about it. I don't want you to get upset, da 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 da. But then here's the salt. It's almost like, when somebody giving you a bad, like some feedback, they got to throw you the
Mm-hmm.
good first, and then the negative coming like, yeah, you really fucked up on this. Yeah, like on this. Yeah. And so I think it's the same thing, but I really do I have a genuine personality, at least to me. I'm gonna say to me. I'm very subjective, maybe biased.
You
But when I
sound
bring
like
it up,
it.
I think sometimes it may even come up as like, what's the proper word? Manipulative. But
Okay.
it's like I really want to know the answer, but I'm really
Right.
standing in a way that I'm hoping I can get some feedback. But I think that it's really just checking that temperature though. So protecting
Mm-hmm.
the peace, Dion, in a sense, I think that's how I would kind of frame it.
Okay.
This isn't the time. Let's check the temperature. Let's possibly come back to it when both of us are in a better mental state and things have been pretty smooth. But we know that this is not like something that we're trying to throw daggers at each other in a sense.
For
Yeah.
sure.
I agree with you on that, DB. Like you said, checking the temperature because you don't want to poke the bear, right?
Right.
You know, I'm taking a course right now through West Point Leadership, and we do a whole bunch of case studies. And every case study, we always have to identify the root cause, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the root cause of, the reason of this conflict, or the reason why you're not getting the expected outcome that you want? And then I have to go and dissect the case study. But we always, through every situation, through every what I want to say, every disagreement that I'm reading throughout the case study, we always have to identify the root cause. So
Mm-hmm.
it's there, but we have to work around or work in to try to figure out how can we make this better. But I feel like in any conflict or any argument or anything, there's always a root cause. So we have to get to the root cause, because if we don't get to the root cause, it's going to keep on coming back up, coming
Right.
back. So we have to attack the root cause. So even though we just might not want to talk about it, then there's some type of underlying
Mm-hmm.
situation that we have to address
For sure. And
as
that's
far as,
regulation.
yeah.
That's regulating, in those spaces of conflict as opposed of suppression. Suppression kind of says like, I'm not angry, but your body, your nervous system is still feeling like I'm not feeling this. I'm good.
Right.
I'm just, I'm good. I'm gonna let this roll off, but your shoulder's still tight, your jaw still clenched, you still,
Hmm.
you're still
Hmm.
feeling things. Your nerves is still wired, but your mind, you're trying to tell your mind like, nah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm not feeling that. I'm not gonna worry about that. Whereas like regulation will say like, I'm angry right now. I need to slow down. I need to breathe, take a minute, and then respond intentionally. So
Mhm.
however you identify with your ability to regulate, I think is healthy as opposed of suppression, because that suppression, like I said, can lead to resentment. It can also irritability, withdrawal. If another situation presents itself that's similar to whatever you suppressed the first time, you start to find yourself like, you might get an outburst, and it might not even be as intense as the last time, but it starts to kind of roll over into those same spaces.
I think I love that. I love that thought point there, because it also made me think about this too. Like, I do agree that suppression will turn into resentment. I also think that there is a world to where even when you don't suppress and you're opening up in these situations and having those difficult conversations, like resentment can be in those spaces as well. And here's what I mean by that. I talk to, a lot of good brothers, man, and that's why I'm glad we're having this on more of a mainstream, so it can make it out of group chats and one-on-one conversations and things like this.
Word.
But, a lot of times, a lot of brothers also avoid conversations or those hard conversations because the person who they're talking to, you know, is not really inviting for that conversation to happen. So it's like and a lot of times it is opposite sex, right? And so I'm also curious, Dion, from your angle, being a woman,
Hmm.
it's like I think resentment can also grow in a space to where if I'm trying to have this difficult conversation with you, and every time I try to have it, it is I may have taken a break, right? I may have set up the dinner because I'm one like that as well, DB, to where I'm like, let's get out of this environment. Let's go
Hmm.
somewhere. Let's go to a neutral place. Let's digress before we go. Let's make sure we do all the things right before we get there and reintroduce this. If I do all of that, and not to say that matters or whatever, but for what I'm about to say, but let's say all of that happens. We're in another environment. We're having this conversation again, and it's like it's still something that is it's still something that the man didn't do correct to prepare for a healthy conversation, if that makes sense. And it comes to a point to where it's just like, you know what, I may have this conversation, but what I truly feel is now being so far suppressed because I feel like I have to water everything down, to a
Yeah.
point to where that I don't even what I'm saying to you is what you want to hear versus how I truly feel. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And I think
Hmm.
that ultimately that could also be a form of resentment that
Resentment.
grows even if somebody, tries to have that difficult conversation that they really, had to talk to themselves, look in the mirror, like, all right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, like, I'm going to say this. And if this happens, it's like, and all of those things that you prepare for. And it's just like, dang, like, this is what I didn't want to happen. This was not my intent. And it's happening again. And so, I just wanted to share that because, like, I hear, brothers really also experience resentment in both forms, I
For sure.
guess. And it's just like, I guess for our viewers as well, really just encouraging, those that where it's like that's not a you thing in that situation.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I think for the other person who you're having that conversation with, there has to be some emotional intelligence as well on their behalf, and
Hey,
some
bro,
things that they have to
you
do to
preaching,
do the
dog.
work. You know what I'm saying? And so don't look at that and then retract. You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
like we talked about, it's natural for men to rebel against having those conversations and showing that level of emotion. If you've done
Hmm.
the work, if you identify what's going on, if you're able to, articulate it in a way to where you knew it was healthy and you're not pulling any strings, you're not calling folks out their name, and you're doing
Hmm.
all the things that you know you're supposed to do, don't retract and go back to that world just based off of one person's, lack thereof of like research and self actualization.
So
Yeah,
I'm gonna just say,
that was
Doc.
a mouthful, dog.
Yeah, I
That
was
was
about to
good,
say
Doc.
you pretty much.
Yeah.
I ain't got nothing to say to that. You just said it. No, but I was literally gonna say whenever you mentioned like from the conflict between a woman and a man. I know that scientifically, however you want to look at things, women thrive from a place of emotions. But that does not mean that they're emotionally regulated either. I think there comes a time and space of accountability and, recognizing where that other individual may be in their emotional space as well. I think naturally, because we're known as emotional beings, that comes off as like a one up on men, because
Hmm.
you guys thrive excuse me, thrive from more like logical space, and you're not vulnerable. You hear all these cliches and these stereotypes. Not And when I use the word intimidate, it's not so much of like you're afraid, of this other person, but in that space, it can be intimidating for a man because again, women, it, we're always taught that we're big on emotions, and but that doesn't mean they're
Hmm.
regulated either, or have that maturity there as well. They
Hmm.
may not be fully aware, of what they're feeling in those moments, and a lot of deflection can happen.
Hmm.
So, I think there's a balance there and a level of accountability that has to be made. And in those moments, I think, I want to encourage men, or women, whichever way it goes. But in this instance, a man, like you're speaking of, in this type of situation, to call her out on that, and say, hey, I feel. So in therapy, we do like these I feel statements, like I feel this, and because I
Hmm.
feel this when you do X, Y, and Z.
Mm,
She in turn, or the other person in turn, needs to say, what I hear you saying is, just so you can make sure that what you're saying is being, received properly, and they're not misconstruing what it is that you're saying. So I think sometimes we got to simplify things, and not have so much extra emotion, and then we start to reflect, well, last time this happened, and then time,
Yeah.
and then now
man.
where we are. I think.
Yeah, what's funny? I know I was having
Very
a
true.
conversation with some fellas not long ago, and using the words I feel like
Mhm.
sometimes jumps a female right into defense mode. So it's almost like, do we just need to stay away from the I feel part in a sense? But man, do you know how healthy it is to actually be able to have those conversations? I mean, I know you know, obviously, but it's so healthy to have those kind of conversations to say how I feel, and then to be able to actually understand it. Because look, I think you hit it right on the head. I think Doc, you kind of started that piece in terms of sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it is about the person that's receiving the message as well.
Right.
And I think that it's at times it can be misinterpreted. Look,
Absolutely.
I'm so transparent, but I know a lot of people try to read between the lines. And I'm like, don't read between the lines.
Right,
Right.
right,
I'm giving
What
you
I'm
exactly.
Right.
saying is what I'm
exactly
saying.
It's
what's
right
on the
there.
plate.
It's
Yep,
right
yep.
there.
Yeah, it's right here. I'm giving it to you directly on the plate. This is exactly what's being said. That's what it means. But I think that sometimes us as men, one, I will say at times, just again with the conversations, we sometimes we do think we the problem.
Right.
Sometimes we do think it's basically how we deliver the message. Sometimes we do think it's us. And at times it might not necessarily be. So what we tend to do, and we're all advocates of therapy, we jump into therapy and we try to fix us. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? I think that sometimes that may just be us jumping into therapy to figure out how do we actually handle the just brokenness in general. And we are broken. I think we're all broken, but
Mhm.
it's like
Mhm.
how do we mesh into the crevices to make sure that it's not going to continue to be a broken vase?
Hmm.
Very true. Very
Yeah,
true.
and I agree with Dion. Dion, your last statement that you made, accountability. Accountability is like
Yeah.
big on both sides, but
Mhm.
gotta be accountable.
Hmm.
Absolutely. You got to
That's
be
so
aware of where
key.
you are,
That's so
in your
key.
space. Yeah, and in that space, essentially, like you have yourself as an individual. all of your past traumas and experiences and everything that you have dealt with. And now we're in this space collectively together. So, what
Mm-hmm.
have I experienced in my own walk of life that what's happening in this space might be, and we use this, and I'm a mental health professional, and I'm so sick of this word, but I'm going to continue to use it and use it in good faith. What's triggering you, in this moment, or what's heightening you in this space, and everything ain't a trigger. Let's be clear on
Right.
that too.
Right.
But we use
Right.
that word so fluently now
So
out
loosely.
here.
Yeah.
You're
It's
triggering
so
me.
loosely. Everything's not a trigger. Some things it's just annoying to you, and you
Right.
gotta recognize that. It's not like you had something traumatic that happened. It might be the tone that's annoying you, like versus a trigger. Maybe I was yelled and screamed at, my whole life. So when the tone is raised, I get this, my nervous system gets wired. So I think we got to,
Yeah.
again, have that awareness of what's really a trigger, what's not, and where we are regulating or dysregulated, essentially. So accountability is very big in understanding who you are, what your capacity is, in a lot of spaces. And if
Hmm.
that can't be discussed before a conflict arises, then you're going to run into some problems. I think,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of conversations have to be had about where you are, especially if you're involving another person in your life. So, yeah.
Makes sense. No,
For
I
sure.
totally hear that and agree with it. It's great conversation, and I think like what I feel like will be helpful to not just us in this space, but also just our viewers as well. Who's listening in. Dionne, I'll start with you, and then I'll transition it over to the fellas. But I think like what we still may be curious about a little bit is just like what is it we talked about accountability, and we talked about just like how sometimes in a normal situation when it comes to like relationship and things like that, men may feel like they are held accountable more than maybe a female being held accountable. That might be controversial, but I think for the most part, it could be the case. So a lot of times, we talked about as well, it's like it's tough to feel, or you may be threatened, or you may be at back to like start that dialogue when it comes to those difficult conversations. I guess like what might be helpful for me personally, I think brothers in this space and those who are viewing, it's just like what's some practical ways that men can enter hard conversations without feeling like we're escalating it, again, like making the other person feel like they're triggered or annoyed and things like that. And obviously it's like knowing your person too, right? And things like
Hmm.
that, so I understand that. And it could be situational, but just what are some common things that you feel that you have maybe coached some men through, or youth through, or even women who based on what they would like to be introduced to when it comes to dialogue, they may like so we can have a little bit of tools and ammo for when these things happen again.
Well, DB, I think you said something earlier. I would say check the temperature, and get some, understanding that this is what you're trying to do. If you're wanting
Okay.
to, bring something back to the table, obviously understanding your tone, slowing down your talk and speech. I think, and I mentioned before, like simplifying things. When you add too many other words in there, or you're reflecting on other and giving other examples of things, to try to prove your point or to get your point across or to get some clarity there, it can really cloud
Yeah.
it and overwhelm that space as well. Because now it feels like you're just
Hmm.
piling one thing on top of another. So I think keeping
Makes
things a
sense.
little bit more simple and simplistic in that space. Affirmation and reassurance, starting off like, I want to talk about something. I don't want this to turn into an argument, but this is what I want to talk about. Are you in a good space, headspace to address this right now? It's okay to ask a
Yeah.
question. Yeah, so I think just being mindful of your tone, slowing down, because I have a, and I think typically most people, like when you're in a, you want to get it out. Like words is
Hmm.
flowing, you're talking
Word
so
vomit.
fast,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then that, for whatever reason, that creates defense on the other side. So now, so
Hmm.
it's just kind of like slowing down for a minute, making sure your body's calm, before you're coming into it. What happened in your day, that might create a little bit more anxiety or lack of patience if she were or the other party were to say something that might, kind of tip you over the edge a little bit. So you got to make sure you're in the right space too. But I think just bringing in to say like what your goal is from the beginning, this is where I want to get to in this conversation. and then, lead with that. And if it's a person that you love, address that like, I love you, and,
Hmm.
I want to assure that you receive this the correct way. Is this the right time? Check that temperature. So those are some things, I think that could be helpful.
And I agree with you on D. D. We've been through this times and times again, but affirmations like tell us somebody that they're heard in a moment, even though it's
Mm-hmm.
not what I want to hear, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're blowing me out, but just simply saying I hear you in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's
That
I
not.
does
feel
that
that.
that
Yeah.
that means so
It
much.
don't feel good, but I hear you in this moment.
Yeah.
Next step, you know what I'm saying? That has helped me out like tremendously, telling them that they are heard in the moment, even though it's not what I want to hear. I really don't want to say it, but I hear you in this moment. This is a difficult conversation, but I hear you in this moment.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
affirming that and letting them know that you are heard in this moment.
Yeah, the goal is to signal safety, in these spaces. You want to feel
Yeah.
safe. You don't want to feel like we're against one another. I want to take this on together. These are words that you use like to provide that reassurance, to know like I'm not against you in this moment. I want to express how I feel. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to be able to receive how I feel and also express how you feel, and we work on this together. Certain words, really can bring, the conversation to a positive space, and it doesn't have to get so, intense and heated. But
For sure.
safety is a big piece, signal before you
Mm-hmm.
bring a conflict into space.
Awesome.
That was a good
Awesome.
question, Doc.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate the answers as well, and I think like you kind of hit on because I was going to redirect that question, Dion, to the men of like what kind of response makes you feel safe to stay in that conversation. I think you hit it on the head there as well of just like because it's a two-sided sword, and it's one of those things to where even the person who you're receiving that information again has to be checking the temperature. They have to be down with having a difficult conversation. A lot of the times they probably already know what the conversation consists of. If not, you'll know if they want to have it when you tell them, or at least
Mhm.
share the bare surface level of what your intent is. And I think like as men, like we just want to make sure as well as women want to feel heard, or your significant other, or just the person you're having that hard conversation with, we the person who's delivering it wants to be heard as well, and they want to make sure that the intent is received the way how it truly is, and not be gaslit. You know what I mean? Not to say all of the things that you feel, but then somebody dissects it. Like I think you call this out, DB, which I it's a pet peeve of mine of just like listen to what I'm saying, not
That's
try
it.
to dig and
That's it.
try to figure out the between the lines and things like that. All of that is safety to me. You know what I
Hey, Dion,
mean?
what
Of
you
where
laughing
it's
at?
like
What
allow me
happened?
to, yeah, but
Personal
no,
experience and
it's
personal
definitely all of
reflection
that.
going on here. I'm like, ooh, yeah, I be digging sometimes. I'm like, all right, just stop
Man, look,
digging,
we
Dion, stop
giving it to
digging.
you.
Yeah, like
It's
don't
a
dig. So,
steak
so
dinner.
when
It's
you say
literally
this, does
that.
this mean? When you say this, does this mean? And it's like I said what I
Yeah.
said.
So basically, what you mean is,
Yeah,
no, that's not what I meant. It's literally what I just said. It's on a platter. So no, I think all of that gives, I mean, both parties, safety, because sometimes,
like,
we as men, we can do that as well, especially when our ego is being played with a little bit, or,
Hmm.
something to where we feel like should be a responsibility of a man to do, and we don't feel like we're living to that expectation, and we're
Right.
called out about it. It's like, hey, what you trying to say? Last week I took out the trash. What you say? And all of those things, right? And so I love how it could be looked upon as like both sided, and I think like
mm-hmm,
it really covers all of the questions that I had in a general sense.
Hey, well, look, let me before you jump in there, I just want to say that look, and even with spouses, I think that the biggest thing is that you remember that this is the person that you chose. I mean, I think that that's a heavy call out too, that you chose
Sure.
yesterday, you chose this morning, before and after these conversations. I think that's something that's very important too. And don't try to. I think the worst thing is try to typically like just intentionally piss somebody off. I don't care if it's just a boyfriend, girlfriend, any kind of a relationship. It's typically somebody that you chose. So still make sure that you're using the proper words, and hopefully even the proper setting and volume of your tone, things like that. Josh, I know you had one more question that we had that kind of simmering, so I'm gonna pass it over to you, brother.
I'm gonna let Doc get that off. I brought it up before, so we have a female woman in the conversation.
Hey,
I'm gonna
pull
swing it
your
over to
bootstraps
Doc.
up, Dion.
How do you? I'm trying to figure out how you want to ask this question, though, Jake. And so I'll just preface it by this, and let me know like what the question actually is. I think like ultimately it's a lot of times, right, to where you kind of like what you said, DBF, right? Like, know who you're marrying, know like who your partner is and all these things. And I think like this question is coming from just like our culture, black man, black woman, relationship. A lot of times what we'll see is that, when black men gain a level of success, for whatever reason, again, it could be situational, right? And I'm pretty sure it is, but for whatever reason, they're leaving our black women, for other ethnicities or what have you.
Hmm.
And so I guess like having someone here, a strong black woman here,
Yeah.
very educated, you know what I mean? And I don't know what your relationship status is, and things like that, or your history, but, what is your take on, kind of like having someone that you're involved with, you're seeing their progression from maybe not ground zero, but they
Mhm.
wasn't at the level of success that they're at as of right now. And,
Mhm.
they, for whatever reason, they feel like the time is up for the relationship with that queen, and they go elsewhere.
Mm.
It's a heavy one too. You know what
Not
I
you
mean?
scratching, not you scratching your face,
You got me. Yeah.
but it's a trending topic. Like we see it all the time.
We
Yeah.
do.
So you're saying, let me make sure I hear what you're asking me directly is a man that is elevating in his goals and success in life, he is pretty much shying away from black women, or is it that they
Essentially,
they
yes.
leave the woman that they're with for someone else?
It
Hmm.
could be both, but I think more
Okay.
specifically starting with our queens and going elsewhere.
Hmm.
Right.
Okay.
The sister has built him up, and then once he's at this height of elevation,
Hmm.
he then sister's gone, and then something of other ethnic descent.
So I think there can be a multitude of things that can be considered in this topic, or that, like you said, is very trendy. One thing I feel like, and again, this is me being my opinion. This ain't, from any other perspective.
Sure,
Hmm.
sure.
A lot of times I think in society, what we have seen is that when a black man gains success, there comes this level of power and control, and that ignites the ego significantly. What we also know on the other side of that with black women, we can be very vocal. Again, I'm going to take this all the way back to like slavery and civil rights. We did not have rights, starting off. We needed a man to do things. We couldn't get bank accounts. We couldn't vote. We couldn't do a lot of things. So, in this
Hmm.
generation in time, just as a black man gaining success, a black woman also feels just as like proud, to have
Right.
the right to have a voice in any space, or situation. I think, unfortunately, in this Western civilization and how we grew up and how we've been conditioned to be put against one another anyway, as a black man and black women, because we go from that survival mode, right? And taking it, a little step further with black women, there was, and me and my boyfriend actually had this conversation the other day, that crack epidemic and all things, and single parent mothers, we've been having to, women have been needing to put on capes. It's a lot of single parent homes and moms are left alone.
Absolutely.
So now
Hmm.
we feel so strong. We got to have this strength. And those mothers are raising us.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I grew up in a two-parent household. However, my father was in the military. So the first 12 years of my life, he wasn't present physically. So my mom had to hold the fort down. And I was raised, get a job. You don't need a man for this, So I think that hyper independency comes in to perspective. And again, taking it back to the man, and whenever he gets to that space of success, I ain't trying to hear none of that. Fall in line. Be more
Right.
submissive. We hear the word submissive and, all of these things. And I think with women, we struggle black women, we struggle sometimes in that space. So I think
For real.
it's a lot of factors I think that could be considered, but I think ultimately it's that control and power factor, where, hey, I got the success now, I got all the things that line up. I don't need no pushback. I don't need no extra nothing.
Hmm.
I don't need
That's
all that.
exactly what it's
Yeah,
for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
man. Hey,
No.
you also another mouthful because I can go about 10 more minutes on the of just a question around hyper independency.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually, if you don't mind, maybe a quick response, Dion. Do you think that today we're still trying to gear our kids, especially our little girls, into the path of hyper independency?
Unfortunately, yes, because I think that on the other side of where we talked about young black boys and you guys growing up, and that
Hmm.
survival, we don't want to feel like we're in survival as black women. So we end up having this super independent, mindset or how we've been conditioned to be able to do things on your own. Because
Yeah.
for whatever reason, we don't want to appear weak either, right? I don't, so I think that just comes with black culture, period. We don't want to look like we're weak. We got to power through it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that it's still a thing, of that hyper independency. And I don't think our parents and their parents even heard of hyper independency, right? I think it's just coming from a space because, women back then actually needed a man for something. So now they're trying to teach women like, hey, now you don't have to have a man, or there was moments like I mentioned where fathers were in prison and, that prison school to prison pipeline situation that we had where
Mm.
women had to step up, and do things that a man, those gender roles and whatever you want to may have you, they had to play those things. So that spilled over into the next generation, the next and the next and the next. So
Yeah.
Sense.
yeah.
Perfect sense.
Man. Hey, listen, I think that's a solid way to end this one, Dion. Listen, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for being our therapist today because you heard a lot of everything from us. But
I
listen,
know.
I think this speaks volumes not just from us three, but I think from so many other men that's out there that's listening. And
Hmm.
listen, even the females, even ladies that's listening. But
Yeah.
Dion, I
Sure.
wanted to make sure that I properly give you space to let people know how to reach out to you, how to contact you, how to make possibly even get inquiries on services. So I'm gonna give you a second. Just give some contact information, and that way
Yeah.
people they can hopefully reach out to you.
Sure, sure. So I know you kind of gave a little bit about me early on. I do primarily work in consultative services around mental health and behavioral health. I'm also a life coach, so I'm able to support in a lot of different capacities. And if you have any interest or anything from the mental health and behavioral health side, whether that be family dynamic with your children, relationship management, or even career spaces, and you're looking to navigate things from a consultative side, feel free to hit me up. My email is the SMIT205 at gmail.com. My Instagram is deserve it all. And that's DEESERVEITALL. That's a little thing I play on because it's deserve it all and I serve it all. My nickname is D. So
There we go.
anyway, but
I
yeah,
love it.
just feel free to contact me in any way, or the guys here. You guys have my info, so if anyone reaches out to you inquiring things, feel free to hit me up as well and make that connection. It's all about networking, so I'm available.
Absolutely,
All about networking.
absolutely.
Absolutely. Man,
And I will
we
say,
gotta have a part two, man. We gotta have a part two,
Definitely.
DB.
Yeah,
absolutely,
man, bring me back, bring
Definitely.
me back. We got some more things to talk
absolutely.
about. I
This
enjoyed
is
Yeah.
this.
awesome. This is awesome.
And listen, I
Yeah.
want
This was
everybody to know
good.
that she does follow back within 24 hours. The
I
grace period
do,
is
right?
there,
I saw
so
your name. I was like,
that's,
okay. Yeah, because I'm private over
that is
here. I keep,
that is
I maintain
appreciated.
a private life. So.
Now, one thing that I appreciated the most is that you added perspective. I think Doc, he called this out, but you added perspective. You didn't correct us. You didn't try to put
Right.
us in the wrongs in a place of in a box in a sense. In a sense, that's all appreciated as well. But more so, what is this table? I'm going to end it up with this one. What is this table? Mic check is a space for us to be able to come. We be vulnerable. We share our perspectives. And we give an outlook based on what we've experienced and or some things that we truly believe in going forward. We're telling our pieces of our story, and we're sharing it with you guys. And hopefully you guys can use it as well moving forward in your lives. But listen, great episode, season
Definitely.
2, episode 4. A big shout out to Dionne for joining us today. We really appreciate you for being here and present. My brother's Doc, my brother's Josh. Appreciate you guys as well.
Hey, DB.
Nope, go ahead, Josh.
Like Dionne, thank you so much for coming on. And me and Dionne have been some friends for quite a few years now, and I just want to give you your flowers in front of the World Wide Web. You are a dope person. You are a great sister and a great friend. I just want to give you your flowers.
Don't make me cry, Josh. Dang, we
Yes,
talk about
sir.
emotions
Yes,
over
sir.
here. Like, come on now. But no, I appreciate it, guys. I feel like, and people that will watch this episode, they probably gonna want some more. They're like, wait a minute, y'all can't end that way.
Right,
So,
right, right, right.
most definitely don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always available and open to this dialogue. I'm glad you were receptive, to my perspective and my expertise in certain spaces. But you guys are the men here, so I appreciate your perspective and having this platform, for yourself and for others. So keep doing what you're doing. I love it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dionne. Appreciate that. All right, y'all. Listen, we signing out of here. Y'all have a good one. All right.
That's a wrap.